Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of Nerd Notes. I'm your host, Coach Stahlecker. I hope you had a fantastic winter break and are back now and ready to rock in 2018. Every new year brings the latest and greatest technological innovations that make the Christmas presents that we just got seem like a pet rock. Technology and information are directly related. The faster that information spreads, the more technology improves. You can look back at history and find technological booms in the 1500s after the invention of the printing press, and in the mid-1800s after the invention of the telegraph and telephone. Recent history is full of technology that was awesome in a bygone era, but no longer relevant. As a matter of fact, you could probably make an entire 8-minute video out of it. Now that I've got your attention, silence those cell phones before the show starts, folks. This is Nerd Notes. Science and technology work hand in hand to meet the needs of society. With every innovation that comes along, the door is open for someone else to make it better and faster. Usually it takes just the right amount of ingenuity, cost-effectiveness, and luck to hit it big with new technology. Sometimes an innovation hits the market that seems so far ahead of its time, we marvel how it's even possible. It's kind of like when you first saw the CGI dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Sometimes it's actual technology that we can use to make our lives better, and sometimes it's science fiction for entertainment's sake. Sadly, there are no real theme park dinosaurs, and I'm still waiting on my hoverboard, Marty McFly. Often, when we look back at history, some of the technology that was adored by society at the time seems like an ancient artifact by modern standards. I'm looking at you, handheld Tecmo. There's a lot of trial and error that goes along with technological innovation. The things that we love today all evolved from previous incarnations or other inventions totally. Because of the availability of information and the speed at which it travels spurs innovation, communication technology has been an important part of our modern existence. Most of the things that we've grown to love about technology over the last 100 years all fit in our cell phones now. Since that hasn't always been the case, here's a rundown of all the cool things you missed out on having been born in the 21st century. Since smartphones are actually handheld computers with dedicated operating system, let's start with their history. First conceptualized by Alan Turing in 1937, computers as we know them were made mainstream by IBM in the 1950s. But the space needed for storage then was incredibly large. In the 1970s, Microsoft and Apple were founded on the basis of creating home computers, with the Apple II becoming the first available with color graphics in 1980. Revolutionized by the Intel microprocessor, Windows operating system, and the World Wide Web in the early 1990s, more than 1 billion home computers were sold by 2002. Many of the most recent innovations have come about because of increased processing speeds and the ability to store large amounts of data on relatively small disk or memory cards, or through cloud storage, which can be accessed from anywhere online. Before the invention of TV, the radio was the focal point of entertainment in the U.S., with entire families gathering around to listen to their favorite program. In the music world, metal-cut recordings for phonographs have been around since the late 1800s, but they really hit a groove with vinyl records in 1947. Vinyl would be popular through the disco age of the 70s, but were replaced by cassette tapes in the 80s and early 90s. Many of your teachers can probably recall listening to the radio for their favorite song and then hitting record on the tape deck when it came on. If you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, you may be familiar with the Walkman or the portable tape player we'd play them back on. When CDs became popular, Walkmans were replaced by Discmans. The 21st century brought Napster and iTunes to computers and MP3 players. All would be relegated to the trash heap with the introduction of streaming services like Pandora or Spotify. Video games were invented by manipulating the signal in a cathode ray oscilloscope in the 1950s. By the 70s, Atari released home gaming systems with classic games like Pong and Space Invaders. The 80s introduced the 8-bit titan Nintendo and its lovable princess rescuing plumber Mario. The 90s brought handheld devices like the Game Boy and advanced graphics on platforms like the PlayStation and N64. When the PlayStation 2 was introduced in 2002, it sold 150 million units. The 21st century has seen huge innovations in motion control as well as online gaming, with each new system offering more than its predecessor. While the cell phone hasn't challenged the traditional video game market, games like Pokemon Go and Angry Birds have been hugely successful. As a result, handheld devices like the Nintendo 3DS and the PlayStation Vita have declined in popularity over the last decade. The first cameras were introduced in the mid-1800s and gained popularity thanks to the unprecedented coverage of the Civil War that only the new technology could provide. At the time, still photography was all that could be processed until the technology improved in the early 20th century. By the 1920s, moving pictures were all the rage, and people started going to the movie houses to see the latest shows. The airwaves beamed TV shows right into our homes in the 1950s, and by the 1980s we had both the Polaroid camera that could produce instant photos, and we'd already gone through several versions of the camcorder designed for home movies. The late 90s were famous for disposable cameras, but as photography went digital in the early 2000s, film that had to be developed and printed by a trained professional went the way of the dodo. In 2018, digital cameras are a selling point for most smartphones. Photo sharing apps are all the rage, and you can take your movies and TV with you almost anywhere with streaming services like Netflix. The telephone was invented in the 1870s by Alexander Graham Bell. The first models involved an extensive network of wires, and a switchboard operator had to connect your calls. Calls over great distances were nearly impossible. This was upgraded eventually to the rotary phone and then later the corded touchtone phone. It presented a new set of obstacles for teenagers of my generation because your parents rarely let you have one in your room, so there was no privacy until the cordless version came along. Mobile and cell phones evolved from there, but went through some pretty clunky and outrageous models before even flip phones came along. Modern touchscreen smartphones have only been around since 2007. If you throw in the calculator, the calendar, the compass, and a map, you're still only scratching the surface of what a cell phone can do. But not everything that technology brings us is great. While cell phones function as a window to the rest of the world with an infinite amount of information at your fingertips, they can also be a dangerous distraction. Every year, the number of traffic deaths related to cell phone distraction grows, and the states are responding with stricter limits on cell use and cars. Truth is, when you try to do two things at once, your attention is divided and your performance at both tasks suffers. In the classroom, the stakes might not be as great as they are on the freeway, but the result is no different. Cell phones affect your ability to stay focused and finish work on time. And it's not just your phones either. Being consumed with what you're missing on social media can also have a negative impact on your studies, which is kind of ridiculous because school is a social network and all of your friends are already here. We're lucky to live in this techno age in which the only limitations to innovation are our own imaginations. Wow, I sound like Dr. Seuss. It's important that we learn to use new technology to create as well as consume, but we have to do so responsibly. So do yourself a favor and turn your cell phones off when you head to first period every morning. You'll save that valuable charge for lunch or the bus ride home, and your teachers will appreciate it. You might even learn something. Let's let technology be a part of our future rather than a roadblock to it. That's all for this week's episode. Remember to keep on chasing greatness, doing what you love, and I'll see you next week. Do you like videos like this? You can find me on YouTube at Hero City EdWorks or follow me on Twitter at Hero City Kevin.